Kia ora, haere mai. Greetings to all of you, and welcome to the second event in this series of events organized by Shailesh Bagwe as a part of his NZ World News Initiative. Shailesh will talk to us for a few minutes and tell us more about his plans and ideas, but uh, I'll leave that to him. Today's event is very special. It's about an industry that affects us all in more ways than one. It affects teachers like myself and Aruna. It affects the economy. It affects the universities. It affects parents, children, and everyone. So at the moment, the situation is pretty delicate. Things are in need for improvement, a lot of problems why that cannot happen. And we will have Honorable Paul Goldsmith speak about it. We'll have Cathy, I will introduce both of them to you one by one. And then we have already received a lot of questions from the participants. Shailesh has made a list of the questions and he'll be asking them towards the end. And finally, at the very end, we will throw it open to the attendees for any last minute questions. So let's get started. Shailesh, can you quickly, in a couple of minutes, just talk to us and tell us what NZ World News is all about and whatever it is? And may I
Yeah,
request you and all of us to just be mindful of the time so that we can have the entire event wrapped up as planned. Shailesh, over to you.
thank you very much, Anand, and welcome everyone. And I, first of all, uh, very much thankful to the Honorable Minister Paul Goldsmith, who has um, given us his time to talk about the education, which is the burning topic and a current affairs where we know most of the kids go to school, whether it is primary, secondary, or NCA or university. Education is one of the key aspect of human beings and existence. So I really appreciate Paul's time here today and also welcome all the members who have shown interest and passionate about education, learning more about it today. So first of all, I would like to say that I made an attempt this last year during COVID as well to do online events. And as a media, I run my own NZ World News media channel. It's a complete online channel. Last year it was formed. And my attempt here is to bring and give information, awareness, and internal and external support through the dialogues, through the communication channel that we can, through all the stakeholders and people like you who are passionate about giving and making an attempt to support each other in this sector. So this is one of my first series for education sector. Um, and this is my humble attempt to do this. So I really want to say that we will be bringing up some more topics which are relevant to the today's industry and current affairs like the health, education, and then we can also bring about housing and all sorts of things that we are affected by today. But education definitely is one of the key things, whether you are a child, whether you are an adult, or whether you are a teenage. So I would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone once again for this forum of Q&A sessions that we wanted to do, but we will be hearing a lot from two speakers that we have got today who has accepted our invitation to talk about education. Cathy Gillespie, she comes from Christchurch, she is a learning and development online, also relevant coaches. Then we have got here another passionate course developer, Aruna Shekhar here, which we would like to also welcome. And so we can hear more about questions from her. But I welcome once again for the Honorable Paul Goldsmith and take this opportunity once again, thank him to make this occasion a really memorable one. Hope so. So over to Anand, um, who will be running this whole event today. And we will go as we go along, and then we will ask questions and then see how we can bring some good thought process and collective effort to make this education as our own sector, which is very important for us. Over to Anand.
Thank you, Shailesh. Thanks a lot. And without further ado, let's get the speakers to talk to us. A quick introduction before we do that. Honorable Paul Goldsmith, as we all know, has been a Minister of Tertiary Education in the past. In 2016, he has been the Minister for Science and Innovation. He has been the Minister for Regulatory Reform. And at the moment, he is the National Party spokesperson for education. Paul is an enthusiastic pianist. He has a broad interest in the arts. And more importantly, he is a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. If you do not agree with his views, I would just urge a little bit of caution in being diplomatic. You don't want to see him getting angry. Right, I mean, of course, he is also part of the parliamentary rugby team, man of many talents. And in this current situation, in the current flux that the industry is in, no better person than Honorable Paul Goldsmith, Member of Parliament. So without further ado, Paul, forum is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anand and Shailesh, and all for the opportunity to say a few words this evening. Yes, we're all stuck in, well, us Aucklanders amongst you, stuck in lockdown and starting to get a little bit bored with life, and but spending a lot of time with the family. Fortunately, I have plenty of opportunity to continue to engage with the sector from the front room, but it's a bit irritating. I can't get back to Parliament. Parliament starts again next week, and for some reason the Speaker, Trevor Mallard, has decided that, well, regardless of what the rules are, he has arbitrarily said that if you want to come down to Parliament from Auckland, you need to go into isolation for 5 days in a little room with somebody providing you with food for 5 days, and then stay in Wellington right through the 3-week session. So you'd be away from home for about a month to go to Parliament. And then he says he's the family-friendly Speaker of Parliament. So I can't quite work him out. So we won't be going until he comes up with something a little bit more sensible. But look, anyway, education, of course, we're in a time of crisis immediately in Auckland, having schools closed for 7 weeks and still closed, and no clear date of when they start. The real problem there is, well, there are a number of issues. Obviously, learning online is not as good as face-to-face. There are some schools that are doing an amazing job, and some schools are carrying on with lessons more or less the same as normal, although you can't obviously do a chemistry lab or anything at home. But there's an enormous number of schools which are doing very, very little. And if they're lucky, the kids might get an email twice a week and a call from a teacher. And so what's happening is it's reinforcing and deepening the deep inequities that we have in our education system. There's a principal in South Auckland who said online teaching is just a joke. In my community, it doesn't happen. So what you're seeing is a reflection of our highly varied education system. We had one principal in Wellington saying, if you sending a message to her parents saying, look, if your kids want to spend the entire time in front of television, that's fine by me. This is difficult times. We've just got to get through it the best we can. That's certainly not my approach, and it's very odd to be coming from a principal of a school. So there's the real learning challenges, but there's also obviously the social and mental health issues of kids being locked up over this long period. So our very strong view, of course, is to want to get the schools opened as quickly as we can. The Prime Minister spent the first 6 months of the year saying other countries need the vaccine more than us. We can wait. And now she's running around trying to catch up as fast as possible. And as a result, we've been exposed to this inevitable outbreak, and we're in a terrible jam. So that's the short-term issue. So, our strong call is to get the schools open as quickly as possible. It seems to me if a principal can demonstrate that the staff are fully vaccinated and you can have rapid tests, why can't the schools open on Monday? I can't see why they can't. And let's get on with it and send a very clear message that there's benefits about being vaccinated and get them back to school. But there are many much more long-term issues around the education system in New Zealand. We've prided ourselves on having a very good education system, and in many respects we still do. But if you look at some of the international comparisons, studies like PISA or TIMSS, you'll find that New Zealand is falling off the pace with the best, particularly in maths and literacy and science. When we were usually way up in the top 10, we're now down, falling down the ranks. And that, what does that matter? Well, some people say, oh, no, it doesn't really matter. We're different. We're New Zealanders. We run around outside and we're not highly stressed. We're not like the Chinese in Shanghai. We don't do rote learning, and it doesn't really matter. I think that's nonsense. I think if we want to enjoy a first world living standard as a country, then we need to have our students coming out of school amongst the best in the world at things that matter. And you can't have a knowledge economy if your kids aren't the world's best at maths and science. And we used to be able to aspire to that, and we should be able to today. And we should aim high and think globally. So the way I've divided it up is into 4 areas that we should be thinking about as the foundation for a good education system. The first and the most obvious is that the kids have to be at school. And you might say that that's obvious, but only 3 out of 5 children are attending school regularly, which is just an absolutely disgraceful figure. And it's not brand new, but hasn't been getting particularly better. There are some. I went to a school in Hamilton, for example, Whitiora Primary School. Only 15% of the students attend regularly at that primary school. This is not just 16 and 17-year-old kids bunking off and working. It's primary schools as well. And these are catastrophic figures, and we need to have an absolute focus on making sure that the kids are at school, sending a clear and unequivocal message to parents that their duty as their civic duty as a New Zealand citizen is to make sure their kids are at school, just as it is to make sure your kids are buckled in a car seat and any other basic things. And then we also need to focus on the need to have people knocking on doors and making sure those kids turn up. So being at school is foundational and pretty fundamental. Second, we need to have a world-class curriculum that prepares our kids to succeed globally. And those in the industry might know there's all sorts of reviews of the curriculum going on at the moment. And my worry is that as it is at the moment, it's too loose, and what's being taught is falling off the pace. And so what we've seen over the last decade or so is ever higher rates of kids getting NCA level 2, but ever lowering rates of basic literacy and numeracy. And because kids are able to do all sorts of subjects that don't have rigorous numeracy and literacy in them. Now that's being tidied up a little bit, but there's a long, long way to go. I think we should always keep global in our focus. Things like maths, and physics, and data science and coding, they're international things. There is, I think, frankly, a tendency in the Ministry of Education to see everything through the lens of the Treaty of Waitangi, which is important to our education system, and we should acknowledge what's special about New Zealand and the unique things about our heritage and our history, but extending that deeply into science and maths and every subject, I think takes away from the necessary focus on what our kids succeeding in what the rest of the world thinks is science and what the rest of the world thinks is maths, not what we dream it up to be in some unique little tiny place called New Zealand. And so, my general view is we've got to keep global in our focus and aim high, think globally. Third thing, so you've got to have the kids at school, you've got to have a world-class curriculum, and there's a long way to go on both of those two things. Third, you need to have teachers who are equipped and knowledgeable to be able to do a good job. And we've got many, many excellent teachers in this country, but we also have many coming out of our Teachers Training College without the basic literacy and numeracy skills themselves in order to teach effectively. And so there's real work to do there. We also, in our highly, highly devolved system, we have a situation where every teacher in every school is figuring out how to teach maths and coming up with a class pattern and finding their own resources and recreating the world for themselves, which creates an enormous amount of pressure on teachers and highly varied outcomes. I think we do need much more guidance from the centre and much more help with providing clear expectations and help with teaching. Not some people might say go back to a clear textbook for some subjects like maths and things like that, and I'm open to that, but certainly more assistance so that there's less variation from teachers. The final thing is that we've got to measure progress, and that's basic to every endeavour, whether you're in business or anything. You don't know if you're making progress if you don't measure it in some way. If it's in business, it's about staying in business is a good place to start and making a profit. In education, we all want to know that our kids over the course of a year have learned something and it's sunk in. Unfortunately, in our education system in New Zealand at the moment, they can go for 10 years from age of 5 through to 15 without ever encountering any rigorous, robust, externally moderated assessment of whether they've made any progress or not. So broadened national standards, the government threw it out. Now, there are plenty of good schools that use various tools available to them, like e-ASTL and the PAT test, but there are equally many, many schools that don't. And so parents don't know when to worry about whether their kids are falling behind. And we're operating in a complete black hole as to whether we're making progress or not, whether some schools can carry on with very poor performance year in, year out, and there's no accountability in the system. So that is a major, major problem. So when I look at the education system, then I think that would be our focus. First, send very clear expectations around attendance and put the resources into that area. Second, continue to review the curriculum in a way that focuses on global expectations of excellence. Thirdly, put resources into better equipping our teachers with the knowledge and skills so that they can teach effectively. And third, have clear, robust, externally moderated measures of progress on a regular basis. And if we do that, I think we can achieve the goal of education, which is to enable our kids to succeed globally and have opportunities to do well. And everybody, regardless of their background, has that opportunity in New Zealand if we get this right. So that's enough from me for a start, and very happy to engage in discussion and Q&A as we follow on. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was insightful, interesting, and very, very relevant to the theme of the program, the vision and the mission of education in New Zealand. So really thought-provoking, and I hope picks up some of these ideas, and with each passing day, we grow stronger and stronger in the education process. A couple of things which I would love to get your views on a bit later, maybe in the question and answer, is also on the area of international students who affect New Zealand in so many different ways, in terms of right from the universities to the homestays to the takeaways where they eat. So a probable suggested way forward on international education would also be helpful. We'll bring that up in the question and answers. Thank you once again. I now move on to introducing Cathy Gillespie, who's a learning consultant with Like Minded, and basically she and her company are involved in advising and designing learning experiences from start to finish, working closely with clients to understand their needs on a wide variety of learning related projects. Cathy firmly believes that like-minded learning solutions that enhance business performance and support a healthy workplace. Once again, something very important, very relevant, especially in the current COVID affected situation where workplaces and working from home and all those things have had a tremendous impact on the life of all employees. Over to Cathy Gillespie.
Well, kia ora, everyone, and thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you, Paul, for setting a very high bar for me indeed. You're obviously far more experienced at public speaking than me. But hopefully I can give you a bit of an insight, just a different lens from an employer's perspective. And we are actually, we like to be very connected with the younger people because we've always operated opportunities for them to get a leg up into industry. So we also work with some of the tertiaries to using interns as well. So there's a lot of things that you said that we definitely have some common ground on, and you might hear some of the same ideas reflected in my section. So my task tonight is to bring a bit of industry insight into the room. The caveat here is that this is my personal experience within my industry. So I am aware that there will be pockets of Aotearoa that are working on topics that I might cover and may make comment on. But the concern I have is that some of those things and the good initiatives are not reaching everybody or not reaching the right people. So that's why I thought I would throw it into this discussion. So I hope you take it as it was meant. So I've been working in the industry for more than 25 years now, particularly in learning and development. And Like Minded is just a small company that helps out people with the design and the development of it. So as you can imagine in my history, I've seen an awful lot of change and continual change. And if I was doing what I was doing 25 years ago, I wouldn't have a job. It's not there, it's changed that much. But there's been a really big shift in the learning and development industry. And that was before the pandemic started, which has only increased exponentially since March 2020, as I'm sure you're all aware. So with 10 minutes, I've just picked on two main areas that have been occupying my thoughts over the last few months. And I just want to share with you how the industry has changed for us, and then just talk about what that means we might need from education in the future. And that's where I hope you'll see some commonality. So at risk of stating the obvious, the biggest shift is the opportunities to deliver learning experiences face-to-face have been impacted. And the shift from face-to-face to online is just huge. And it applies to all ages, so it is right from adults down to the youngsters, but we have massively lost the benefit of these human learning interactions. So what I want to make clear is, often you hear me introduced as she works in online learning and all the rest. Although the majority of my work is around there now, I am 100% a blended learning believer. There are things we cannot do online. And so, I agree that we need to be able to either get that back or be clever about how we're delivering training to replicate the online experience better and just keep learning. But I would always advocate, as I say, I very rarely would advocate anyone going completely online in any of our corporate clients or tertiary institutes that we work with. So that said, it has an impact on the corporate world, but those still in education spend a greater proportion of their time in study, and they have been hit hardest. So my personal concern is that for a generation who have lost their education, they had their education interrupted, they've lost that human interaction in their learning, and it's not as rich. The learning and the retention is nowhere near as rich as it was. And I'll give you some reasons for that later on. It had to happen, fair enough, but there's no point looking backwards. So I think what we need to do is just channel our energies into how can we heal the wounds, fill in the blank spaces, and have that real positive attitude about saying, we can catch up. We can catch up. So what I'm currently concerned about in our own industry is that through rushing to go online, and that is the same with schools, through rushing to go online, there's a danger of the quality of the learning dropping. So let me just use an example for you here of PowerPoint. So we've all used PowerPoint. So you've probably watched a really good PowerPoint presentation. And I am pretty sure many of you have watched a really bad PowerPoint presentation, that is distracting because it is either boring or it was so fancy it made you seasick with all fancy animations and transitions. And what's happened is when it's a bad presentation, you lose the content and you don't retain it. So how many people have seen more bad points? Just give a wave. How many people have seen more bad PowerPoints than good PowerPoints?
Both.
One, you've seen it? Yeah. So they're all out there. But the main point I want to sort of say to start with is that PowerPoint is just a tool. And it's one that was pretty much available to everybody, so everybody could get their hands on it. People took it and ran with it when in the early days when it was introduced. But having the tool doesn't mean that you can give a good presentation. And people are unlikely to remember the content of a bad presentation. So when I parallel that with what's happening in online learning, the tools to create and deploy online learning are getting more and more intuitive or easy to use or cheap and available. And organizations are looking and saying, well, it's easy to create online material and buy the tool. What they don't do is train people on how to deliver online, because delivering in a classroom face-to-face is not the same as presenting something through an online medium. And it's not just about putting up a quick Kahoot or a quick document. So what concerns me is that in our rush to put all of this stuff online, people are saying, here's Moodle, this is how to do it, this is how to put up your course, this is how to get the material out to your students. But I personally haven't seen a very good backdrop of how to transition people from delivering face-to-face to delivering it online. So it's not that online learning is bad, it's that the people who are using online learning who don't know how to use the tool are delivering a bad experience. So it's like they say, a bad workman blames his tools, is what I sort of feel is that because we've rushed it, the underlying training on how to design good learning has either been missed or rushed. And again, I'll go back to my caveat, it's not going to be the same place in everywhere, but I am currently working with universities and polytechnics and working with tutors who have been just given access to a learning platform and they've got to go away and do it, no other training. So that concerns me greatly, because what's happening is we're bad-mouthing online learning when we should be bad-mouthing the also improving is probably the more positive way to look at it, but we should be improving the support, and that goes back to something that was said earlier, is supporting these teachers in a way that they can actually understand how it's different to deliver stuff online. So that's one thing for me. So in this technology age, the skills that we're missing and the skills that I would like to see more in the young people are not necessarily or not only in technology. We get distracted by the shiny things. Here's augmented reality, here's, virtual reality, but we leave behind some of the other skills and teaching them in how adults think, how adults learn, how they understand and translate learning. And the skills, to be honest, in simple storytelling, that is one of the fundamental things, storytelling and scenarios. So when we build our learning, we always like to introduce an idea or a concept, then develop it and apply it. But we don't teach teachers about this. They will go through adult learning, and I'll come to that in a minute, because I found some of the adult learning very theoretical. And so when I come to my second point, you'll see that I actually want to connect better with the languages of the employer's world. So it's not enough to be able to work with the tools. We can work with the tools, but we need to understand how to stitch that learning together to make it interesting, to make people want to come and to do it, and understand that that online part is a small component of making the value of being together, face-to-face together, greater. So that's what we say to people. It's like you might have a 4-hour workshop and the first hour they're reading stuff. Don't do that. They can do it in their own time. We can acknowledge the different methods and the ways of learning. And then when they come into the classroom, we can make much better use of the time that we're together to actually build and apply stuff. So the first main point really is about, what would I like the education sector? I just feel like we want to redress some of the skills, the balance of some of the skills that we have, because we do get caught up in using the tools and technology, but we're forgetting some of these other skills that make that learning experience a good one. It's not about being able to click the right button to make this button jump from here to here. So what I really want is more and better training in the art of learning design, and not just training to show people how to use these new tools that are supposed to be intuitive, but they don't teach you how to stitch together the content. So yeah, I mean, I'd just say my experience from that, it just comes from working with a university where the tutors have had zero help to understand the difference between their classroom and how that material is presented online. I'm glad to say it's not the case everywhere, but if we always work to the lowest level, how can we help that lowest level? So the second point that I just want to throw out there for discussion, and that's what it is, it's a discussion prompt, is the connection between education and the real world. Because I did a postgraduate diploma in education endorsed in e-learning and digital technologies. And I did this with years of experience in the industry behind me. And while I'm glad I've done it, there's the value of having recent and relevant qualification to my name. The course was heavily academic, and they simply didn't understand the commercial world. So they didn't understand that as a learning designer, you might, in a consultancy like ours, you might create a course content and you deliver it to your client, and then their learning and development team will take it. It's, with the training cycle evaluation and asking the learners how they do. In a corporate world, they won't pay me to do that. So it's just really, for me, there was a missing link, I would suggest, on how it really works in the real world. So the question for future education from my industry perspective and my personal perspective is just really to explore what we can do to get the secondaries and the tertiaries closer with industry. Now, I know that there's programs for internships, and I've taken a number of interns, but to be perfectly honest, it's never been easy. My experience with the tertiaries is they've had quite a narrow view, or maybe didn't have the freedom to move as much as we would like, but getting them to engage with me as an employer beyond getting the students their tick in their box for their paper has been really difficult. And it was about, getting the numbers in. My example is the fact that I had some interns. I wanted to show them around my office and show them the work we did, and I couldn't do it because it wasn't part of the program. And it's like that sort of conversation is what stops us. It stops us getting closer. So what I want to do is foster a genuine relationship or connect to the right people who are trying to do this with the education sector that operates give and take on both sides and better prepares people for working in the corporate environment. Because again, if we're teaching on a very academic basis, we have a longer ramp up period when someone comes into employment, and we'd be glad to take people in to show them. So just to close out now is really, I'm not just complaining about the lack of connection. I am actually doing something to help bridge that gap and help raise the quality of learning and development certainly in a corporate environment, or people want to come to it. So I'm developing a course which is aiming to fill that gap, to teach people how to do learning design. Now that can be, that's the sort of thing for people who are either new to the industry or are new in careers, new out of school, or those who are managing e-learning teams need to have some kind of sketch framework or standards against which to work, because we don't have, like we do have in the UK, much better, much clearer standards for what is online, what makes good online learning. How do I learn how to write for online learning? So the idea is to bridge the gap, between tertiary industry, get people much more work ready, and then when they're in, get them up to speed quickly so that we're not having that poor quality of learning that I feel personally that we're sitting in there at the moment. I've seen some stuff where people have literally thrown stuff up and said, oh, I've got online learning, and there's 5 videos or 25 videos in some cases, which isn't going to be retained. So, and we're happy to have students working on projects, and I'd love to be invited to share more of the corporate needs with the tertiaries. So that's something where, some of you might have some knowledge of what's going on, or how we could do that. We can discuss that. And I'm excited about it, and I hope it makes a difference, really. But just to summarise, really, a rush to go online is a risk to the quality of the online material if we don't teach them the skills that aren't being taught in how to design the material well and support everybody, whether it be teachers and obviously in my world, the internal e-learning teams. And I think there's a way of working in industry that is not currently being taught and is more academic and theory-based approach. And we would really love to be able to give some exposure to what it's really like in the faster paced corporate world, but what skills are needed to manage that. So that's me.
That was
Thank you very much, Cathy. That was amazing. And one thing that really, really resonated with me once again is your take on how different the online world is from being in the physical classroom. And I think all of us teachers, I am one, I can see Aruna over here, and I'm sure she will agree with me. We were either thrown into the deep end or pushed into the deep end, or we jumped into the deep end without knowing really how to swim well. And that has resulted in multiple simultaneous styles of teaching, not necessarily all good, not necessarily all correct. And I completely agree with you that a lot more needs to be done before online teaching can reach a level where it is supposed to be really effective. Once again, when we throw in the international student sector, that adds one whole new level because these students are second language speakers, they are in different time zones, they have different cultural expectations of how to behave and how to respond in the classroom, and it's one huge challenge. So yes, very, very absolutely right, spot on in what you brought up. Thank you very much, Cathy.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Shailesh,
Yeah.
and we have received a lot of questions
Yeah.
days that led up to the event. Shailesh has made a short list. We made a short list of the most common and burning questions. And of course, if you have anything that's covered there, we have enough time at the end to ask. Shailesh, would you like to talk to speakers and get their views on the questions we have?
Yes, thank you very much, Anand. And that was a good insights, Cathy. I really appreciate that. With this, the world that we are living in is online and learning. And the last years and last couple of years with COVID, after that, we have moved to online to some extent, to large extent. And my question first and foremost is to the Honorable Minister is there are two challenges at the moment. One, the immediate challenges that I see is the vaccinations, which is getting just yesterday when we heard the news that 20% of teachers are, if not opting for vaccinations, then are we heading towards what type of education system that we are living in? So what is your view on the vaccination for teachers? Is it health and safety code that they have to comply? Is it necessary? Doesn't matter what, everybody has got a view, but the question is the education sector is going to be affected by that, as I see it.
Well, look, the government has determined that teachers need to be vaccinated, as mandated. That's been the case in many other countries around the world. It's not something that we are sort of happy with. It's not something that we want. Ideally, we live in a free world, and you shouldn't be forced to do these things. But of course, we have to recognise that human rights have been trampled left, right, and centre. We can't leave our home to do what we want. We're in lockdown. We can't run our businesses. We're being forced to do all sorts of things that we don't want to do, and so we're in an extraordinary situation. So the pragmatic reality is that, particularly in Auckland, people are getting close to their wits' end. The vast majority are vaccinated or wanting to, are in the process of getting vaccinated. And they want to get on with their lives. They want their kids back to school, and they want to open up business and see friends and do normal things. And when it comes to education, having teachers vaccinated is critical. So, as a party national, we have been supportive of the government's mandating there. We wouldn't want to see it extended to every part of the community. And we're critical of the kind of rollout of it, in the sense that they just announced it without any of the detail, and are now trying to work it out, and what exactly it means, and how it's going to be implemented, and what's going to happen, and how the school board of trustees are going to deal with people that don't. And you would have thought they would have thought all that through, but they haven't. And that's something for them to resolve as quickly as possible. But I come back to the basic point. I still don't think, you have to, they're talking about the 1st of January for teachers to get vaccinated, and I don't think we need to wait that long. My local school at Auckland Grammar, they're pretty confident they get most of the teachers are vaccinated. If they can demonstrate that, let's get on with it, and take every barrier out of the way so that we can get back to school as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good one. Coming back to the second question, again, for the last couple of years since online, we moved education sector for kids, for schools and stuff. Do you think New Zealand, as our international standards, where students coming from internationally, particularly for learning, because of the quality of the education that New Zealand offers, do you think the online education has changed any ratings for our education system? Or is it like the quality of the education has changed since turning into online?
Look, I think
well,
I think there certainly are challenges there. I mean, I think New Zealand has a natural, one big natural advantage in international education competitiveness is that we're an English language country, and that's important. I think as I sort of said at the start, I think we've been coasting complacently on our education credentials of the past, and if we're not careful and continue to slide, and not just at the compulsory sector, but if our universities continue to slide, we won't be so attractive over time. And so that is a critical competitive issue. Then you've got the practicalities of international education, and we've been pretty critical of the government being very inflexible around arrangements for the sector. There've been all sorts of attempts made to have special MIQ setups for tertiary education and schools, which I'm highly critical of the government being totally inflexible over. They managed to do it for the people to pick the fruit, but they couldn't do it for a sector that was responsible for $4 or $5 billion a year. And that's, I think, a big reflection of the general attitude towards the economy. They seem very cavalier in saying, oh, well, we don't really need that industry. We don't need to look for oil and gas. International education is a bit risky. We don't like that. We're not all that keen on dairy because they pollute the streams, and we certainly don't like coal, and we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. But how do they expect us to make a living in this country? You've got to do a few things to make a living. And so, I think you've got to be a little bit more focused on saying yes and finding a way for things to happen rather than just saying, no, we're not interested. So there's a lot of work to be done there. The worry is, of course, it's a competitive environment. Places like Canada are open and touting for business, and we hold up. So it's going to take a long time to rebuild.
Sure.
If I can dick in on there, I think just going back to one of your points about the quality and the global, we need to be leading globally. And the thing is, whatever the situation, and however you are, whether you're locked down or not locked down or whatever, the schools can do something about the quality of teaching, of the quality of the learning that they're producing. And I think that we need to just make sure that they're as well supported as they can to keep the quality up. We don't want to slip down and have to claw back. We want to be sort of leading it. And how can we lead it if we don't have any standards of online learning and what makes good on learning or guidance for that on a national level? So for me, I think that the quality is, I don't believe there's anything stopping us in raising the quality. at the moment. We need to do it irrespective of whatever other pressures there are from outside.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and then I've got another question. This is something that's come up from someone that do you believe that the kids that we are living in a world of electronic gadgets, online and computers and tablets, and for the kids, is it what's your view on kids at an early age or at a certain age that they have been given more gadgets to learn? Do you think there should be an age gap, age ceiling before we give them the gadgets as a primary student or as a secondary? What's your view on it? People think that it's too much for kids to get used to that at the early age. There should be some sort of age gap, age difference, or a ceiling of the age. Do you agree on that, or what's your view on it?
Well, I can give you a sort of a general sort of unscientific parental view, I suppose, in the sense that I just wouldn't. I think the big problem broadly in New Zealand education system is that in so many areas, decisions are not made on evidence or research. It's just whatever fad or technology or idea is popular. And so the biggest example of that in recent times is the move to modern learning environments, where you've moved away from an individual classroom to these big barns, as we call them, where you might have 100 kids and teachers roaming around. And I've been to many of them, and if you're remotely challenged in learning and can't cope with noise and trouble, it's a absolute nightmare. So, but the point is, it may well prove to be a better way of doing it, but there's no basis, no intellectual or scientific basis, robust basis for the decision. They're just doing it because some people believe it's best, and so it is with the use of devices. I mean, there's good arguments to be had. I mean, I know, again, my local schools are huge variations. So Auckland Grammar, they have nothing. It's the 19th century. It's people writing on pads and they don't have anything to do with it. That's probably one extreme. I think you should be obviously learning about coding and things like that. I don't have any doubt that most kids in many environments do engage in electronic devices more than enough on their own. They don't need to be taught how to do that at school. But there are certain things that they need to learn. The other extreme is places like Epsom Girls, where they've all got their phones in the class and they're texting through the class, which seems to me to be nuts. I think you need to have sufficient focus on what you're learning, and if you're distracted by devices, not good. But what I'd love to see as a minister is very clear, robust evidence of the merits of different approaches. And some accountability for that. And that comes back to the primary point I was making, that the biggest problem in our whole education system is the lack of accountability anywhere. Because we don't measure any progress, kids go off to primary school, we don't know whether they're going forwards or backwards, we don't know whether this technique is better than that technique, we don't know anything, we just it's all just a complete black box. So there's a long way to go, and that's just one example of the sorts of things that we need to be getting some clear evidence around.
Is it more like a trial and error, that new products come in and then the businesses are ready to give more options to kids?
Of course, you got it. I mean, the whole, every industry, normally you get improvement from innovation. The system that we have, which is why we've always been in favor of charter schools and the private school sector, the integrated school sectors. We're in favor of people trying different things because there's clear evidence of failure in some schools. Why wouldn't we allow somebody to try something different? When it comes to the use of technology, of course we want people to innovate and try things differently. But if you're going to do that, you do need to have some accountability for the results. And that's where the whole system falls over in New Zealand, because there is none, and you just carry on. It doesn't matter whether it works or not. You just do what you want, and nowhere at the end of the day is any clear accountability.
So are you suggesting, coming back to that, like there should be some monitoring and management of it, and then having some standards set so that we can monitor and measure? Is that what you're suggesting? Something cool. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And with your first question, your questions about age, it's like, I personally don't think it's not the age that they have it. It's about how you manage whatever else is happening with them in their life. And to me, with the digital issues, it's about equity. Can everybody get to the same point of knowledge and learning with options? And so that's what you're saying is if you're going all digital and somebody that's not their way of learning, what do we have in place? Because we always talk about different learning styles. The tools are just tools to get the message across. And so we might need to have places where we can't do it all on an iPad because people don't have them. We can't do it on an iPad because people struggle to learn that way. So we do need to have options in it so that everybody has the opportunity to get to the same end point in their learning, irrespective of the method. And I think, like you're saying, you've got some schools where everybody's got their own thing and they're on their phones in the class. That beggars belief for me. It's like, why? They're there to focus, on the learning. So, there are rules. We have to be tough. It's like, with the parenting, it's like, if you don't want them on more than 2 hours a day, or whatever it is, or 20 minutes or 5 hours. But what's the balance of things they're doing? Are they getting the social skills? Are they doing teamwork? Are they learning to, to be accountable in other ways? So the age doesn't bother me. I think it's the balance about how much time is spent on there, because if they're doing on the devices and head down at the expense of other things, then that's to me what is wrong. So the age question, I think, was what you started with, wasn't it? Yeah. It's like it's not an age thing for me. It's how else the rest of their life balances out.
Yeah, the question on the age was more towards the well-being of the kid or well-being of the child was my main focus in giving them a gadget at an early age. Is it a good evidence damaging, or is it a good evidence is encouraging and motivating? We don't know, as the Honorable Minister said.
Well, and look, I mean, that's one of the big sort of questions of the age. I think President Xi has got a view, and he's trying to
exactly
stop all the Chinese kids not being on there too long. And I'll be interested to see whether he succeeds or not. I think he'll probably just create a whole lot of innovation around virtual private connections, and they'll find a way around it. But I think it's a thing that causes a great deal of anxiety for all parents as well, because it's a constant battle. These things are very sort of attractive, and so I think we all just try our best to keep it within reasonable bounds, and then also encourage the kids to be physically active as well, and to give them as much encouragement to do a range of things. And it has become, reality is they've become babysitters, these devices, in many circumstances, and that comes back to parental choices and responsibility, and so which is why I don't favor excessive amount of electronic sort of work at school as well, because reality is a lot of kids spend a lot of their out of school time on them. So I think it's important to keep a mix of physical activity and direct engagement with people, and straight learning. So all these things are pretty pretty difficult matters to deal with. But every generation worries about the impact of technology on the last, and people muddle through. And figure out a way to make it work. So, and there's huge opportunities that are created by it. I mean, it's to my mind, what I find a little frustrating is that we don't seem to be making the most of the opportunities that Zoom and these sorts of things provide. I mean, if you're at a very remote secondary school who have never had the numbers and the ability to attract a first-rate physics teacher, for example. I would have thought technology provides an opportunity to bring one in online and to offer kids in those circumstances far more options. And we do a bit of it, but nowhere near as much as I think we could do to harness the power of the very best teachers in particular topics far beyond a classroom of 30 using electronic means. I think there's huge opportunity there.
So that's coming back to that same, when you said there should be a mix, and this is where my question is now next is online versus face-to-face teaching for kids at a particular, do you think we need to look at a balance between online and the face-to-face teaching?
I think that doesn't matter whether it's children or adults or whatever. It's like you look at what you want, the behavior that you want to change by the teaching, and you work out what the best way to achieve that is. And you then have your answer. You don't decide, right, we're going to do 50% online, 50% face-to-face necessarily. The content and what you need to teach, to me, drives it, which is why I find that even though I'm doing mostly online material, that's what people are requesting, I will often be saying, well, what about a Zoom to follow it up, or a workshop, or an in-person when they can, but absolutely blended. I mean, I don't see how we can go to a completely online education system. I'm not even entertaining that that's a valuable option. I don't know, am I being a bit strong there?
No. What's your?
That'd be crazy. I mean, the big kids learn as much from their peers as they do from parents, and I mean, how can you have a punch up if you're not together physically in the class, and play sport and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I found it quite entertaining the other day because someone was posting about, look, we can create all these avatars and we can go and meet in a garden virtually. And it was like, it's called Meet in a Garden. I mean, it's like, why are we trying to recreate the face-to-face version in an online environment? Because face-to-face gives us something we're not currently getting in online. So yeah, absolutely has to be there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. So my point was only on terms of like, how do we have a balance between certain age group that they need at a certain age more physical or more sports, as the minister was suggesting. Obviously, we need that kind of mix, and not like put them into straight away gadgets or online teaching or learning. And this is where my point was direction towards it. Like, is there a certain ceiling of the age that we say these kids at this age should not be really having that sort of exposure of electronic and things like that? Again, it's a debatable question. But yeah, no, I think that's a few questions that I had, which I had asked. I think now, Anand, I believe you can take over and we can start for other people who wants to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you, speakers, both of you. And thank you to all of those who sent in your questions, which Shailesh just asked, especially the question around using technology and the effects and whether it's too much or too less or all is a really, really burning issue. And I think both speakers have rightly addressed it. Just to sum it up in one line, I would say that technology, just like many other things, is a good servant, but a bad master. And at the moment, we are all tending to be slaves of technology, right from students at a young age to parents to people spending hours and hours on Facebook and putting photos and this. I mean, we have just given up life for using a few tools and trying to live in an imaginary world. I think the real world is where everything happens. Technology should be there just to assist us, not to take over our lives. So great stuff. Thank you, all of you. And the attendees, would there be any other questions in your mind? Anything that came up now? Anything that's not covered in that list? Please, it's over to you now. Please do ask us some interesting questions.
Okay, can I jump in here? I thought
sure.
both the presentations were excellent. I really enjoyed those 4 points by the minister and totally agree that students need clear guidance, that's for sure. And some more textbooks in the subjects will be good. I mean, quickly, I need to sort of introduce myself, I guess. I've been working at Massey University for 25 plus years. Teaching product innovation. I did a PhD there in product development. And in 2012, we rejigged our whole engineering curriculum based on research and evidence-based framework, which is called CDIO, which is conceive, design, implement, and operate. And as part of that, what we did was we have the fundamental theoretical courses, but alongside that, we have project-based courses as well, where we teach the 21st century skills of cooperation, collaboration, communication, and creative problem solving and curiosity. And I also totally agree with Cathy's comments on blended learning. I agree, you need both. My short question for Cathy is, how long is the course for supporting and improving online teaching?
The one that we're developing.
Yeah.
Well, we're actually working it so that it can be like modular based, so small chunks, because not everybody needs to do everything. And this is the whole thing. We need to value your time. So there are small chunks, and I can connect with you afterwards if you want to know more of the details. But not everyone puts narration in online learning, or animation, so they don't need to do that. But everyone needs to learn about the development process. Everyone should learn about action mapping, which is a process to get the behavioural change. And so because it's just our tried and tested method that we've done over the years to develop it. So the idea is that it's something that can be put out that people can do, 30 minutes, and then they suddenly need a different module, 30 minutes. It's better than a whole course, because what I want people to do is also have their own project. And so that I can help and mentor them, they can do their online, or they can have a mentoring option, because it goes back to what you were just saying about the just earlier about the projects. It's great that projects are done, but I just want to change the word from we teach the different skills to I want them to feel the different skills. I want them to be in the environment. And for me, that was what I was trying to get at with the internship. It's you can teach in a different way about how it is to be in corporate, but there's nothing like going in and doing 4 weeks in the office. So I want people to feel that we're very much about learning being delivered on time, small bursts that fits in with someone's current job, but most important is relevant to what they do on a daily basis. So I'm more than happy to give you an outline of what we can have there. And the idea is that somebody might come into an e-learning team and they bring a lot of adult teaching. They don't need to waste their time doing the models, because what we want to do is turn the models, the theoretical thing, into what does that mean you do on day 1 of the project and on day 5 of the project. So does that help you?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
Anything else, anyone? Would you have anything to ask our speakers?
Hi, Cathy. So currently I'm student. Even last year I was student. I tried first time I did study online. But it's okay because now technology is coming, new technology coming. A lot of it's very. Sorry.
You just cut out at the beginning. Sorry, you might just need to repeat that sentence for me.
So I said I'm currently student. Even last year I was student. I was doing my postgraduate in bioculturalism. So it is okay to learn online. It's because of technology, because at the moment we are going through the situation of COVID. But still, my own experience. This year we was around 20 students in class, but some of them they are better for age between around 40 to 50. But a lot of them they are unable to choose the modern technology like Zooming class. My own experience, I think need to be face-to-face study and online both, because the new generation they are very They were very smart to use the modern technology on online Zooming class, you know. But some are of them my age or 50 plus, they are unable to use the technology very well. So I think face-to-face study and Zooming online classes are both need to be 50-50. I'm agree with that one.
Thank you. Well, I think I never accept age as a reason not to use technology, because my comeback on that one to people is, how old is Bill Gates? You know, well, if he can do technology, so it's not about that. It's just, how are we helping them to use the technology? And if we get to that complete barrier, which does happen for people, and it can happen for dyslexics, it can happen for people with learning disabilities, it can happen for people because of age. There's a reason why they cannot engage well with online. And so this goes back to the fundamentals of adult teaching, which is provide learning in more than one formats, because different people can absorb the information in a different way. So offering options of more than one way to get to the finish line may be more expensive. That's the problem, because people might want to do one option rather than two. But if we really want the field to be equitable, we have to be able to support people who don't find the current method. You know, people say, you know, if you had a book and people didn't have, you know, when they didn't have glasses, you'd have to help them because they couldn't read the book. It's no different. There are always going to be barriers, and we need to be thinking ahead that there's more than one way to get over the fence, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone wants to chip in? Yes, please.
I've got a question for Cathy, and just a bit of a psychological aspect to it as well. Having grown up in terms of like sport, I mentioned like learning through sport as well, and kids being involved. So I wanted to have a quick sort of your view or your sort of 2 cents on, positive reinforcement kids versus sort of letting them go through a bit of failure and learning from that as well. So sort of a fine line between that.
We learn, definitely learn from failure. It's a learning experience, so we just, one of the jobs that we've done is Ravensdown used to do, or they do these kids field days, and they go into the field and they do these big games and they do all that sort of stuff. So we've taken their in-field game and we've turned it into an online team activity for them. And so, it's everything, most things, I don't know about swimming or something like that, but flying, but most things can be done, in a different way. But in that team environment, they're being challenged to make quick decisions. And so they're not going to get them right because, it's a time thing and then they're on a leaderboard. So there's ways to motivate people, but they don't have to always win. What they have to have is that if they fail, they have to have an experience that takes that and turns it into a learning experience. So if they fail on something, it's like you said A, B, and C, but the reason that D is correct. And so they don't feel like it's a test as well. We don't need to make people feel like they're under some kind of examination. We need to make them feel like we're helping them on a journey to knowledge. So I have no problems about setting people up to not score the highest or not get the highest, because they're not going to learn. And so, when you sometimes do multi-choice questions and people pick the most likely one, and it's like, I'm not learning why the others were wrong, or I'm not learning. So again, in our online learning that we do is you need to, if they get something wrong, immediate or as quick as you can feedback, so that they can understand why it wasn't quite at the top of the level. We had, again, in this tertiary that I'm working in, it's like they were going to submit an assignment. It wasn't an assignment, it was a practice activity. And the tutor said, I'll have a look at it. If I think there's any feedback that I can give you, I'll give it you. But if I don't give you feedback, let's just assume that's okay. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but every single person can benefit from feedback. And so that's the sort of the mentality that I think we want to work on, is the fact that, wow, here's so many opportunities to teach people, take people further. And so, so that's just, again, I think I probably had a couple of places where it's been a bad experience, and I won't paint everybody with that picture, But if some people are doing it, there are some kids that are suffering.
Great stuff. Great stuff, Cathy. What else? Anyone else? Anything?
Yes, I want to jump
If,
in.
Yeah, sure.
If somebody doesn't have, I have got a couple that I was just doing.
Go ahead.
Maths and science. This is a question for the Honorable Minister. We have seen that maths and science has been lately talked a lot in New Zealand education system. And I wanted to see, is there any progress, updates, or is there anything innovative ways of making the kids learn or adopting some methods to encourage or to motivate for maths and science?
Well, I, to be honest, I'm a bit worried about it. They had the in both those areas we're falling off the pace internationally. We had a pretty useful report from the Maths Royal Society on Maths a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully that will give some impetus to the government to look at that. And there are a lot of issues there around the way that it's taught, and there's been a sort of a fad, I think, frankly, over the last few years around focusing on different sort of methods to come to various answers, even if they're not the most effective ones, and with the result of confusing a lot of kids. So I think I'm a son of a maths teacher, I suppose, so I'm maybe a bit prejudiced about these things. There's a lot of work to be done there. And on science, I worry that, as I touched on before, the government's rewriting the science curriculum and has become, I think, overly distracted with sort of trying to make a unique New Zealand version on what is an international subject. And we aren't doing well internationally, and we need to focus on that and not spend half our time sort of on some sort of unique New Zealand lens on the issue of how earthquakes are created and so forth. I think there's a sort of worrying trends there, and I think a lot of the science teachers are deeply worried about it, but they don't really know how to respond. So look, I think it could be for an interesting time over the next couple of years as we work our way through this.
So is that with the COVID situation and with the uncertainties, again, are we able to adopt some sort of support from different countries that has been using some tools, some accessories to make the kids more motivated for maths and science? Can it be adopted?
We don't seem to. We seem to be becoming more and more introspective as a country globally outlook, and I think that's a huge challenge. And where fundamentally, I think the current government's going in the wrong direction. I think we're at our best as a country when we're outward looking, we're engaged with the world, and that has to be the mindset. But it's a long way from where we are at the moment.
I want to jump into it as another second question is related to two parts to it. One is the shortage of teachers that we have learned a lot about it, talked about it, but I think more shortages is because of the situation of environmental situation or the cost effective situation in cities like Auckland where people can't afford and they just want to go and move. That's one part. And the second part is we are not open the borders. So obviously we are not going to open the borders. So that means we are income from students and we are losing out those students going out to different countries where the borders are opened. So there's two different things, but what's your view on this? Is that something that you are also looking at?
Yeah, well, you've always got to be conscious of the supply of teachers. It does fluctuate, enormously in difficult economic times. People tend to stay working for the state because it's a safe employer, and when the economy is on a boom, it becomes more difficult. I think there are real sort of core sort of challenges in the teaching, the way we sort out the profession. the reality is there are a couple of subjects where it is very difficult to get teachers, maths and physics particularly, and we've got to face reality and pay them more. The unions hate it, but that's life. If we, part of the big problem around those areas in terms of our achievement is that we struggle to get teachers in there, and the reality is if you've got a good maths degree, there are huge opportunities elsewhere, and if we just can't be precious about this, we've got to deal with it. There's no shortage of people wanting to be teaching in some subjects, but there are real shortages in some. So I think we've got to bite the bullet there. Secondly, we do need to enable principals to pay the best teachers more, and no profession in the world can justifiably claim that there is no difference in performance between the best and the worst practitioners, and yet we pay our teachers not on anything other than how long they've been doing the job, and that is not a perfect way of dealing with these issues. Now, I'm not suggesting I don't particularly want to go to war with unions over one topic and distract from every other issue in education. So you've got to deal with these issues carefully. But I think there's no question that there is a shortage in particular subjects that we need to respond to.
Right. Sure. Yes, that's about it.
Shailesh, is that it, or you have any more?
No, that's about it.
That's it. Wonderful. Thank you. Any last question, anyone? Just one more?
Yeah, I've got one.
Welcome, please.
Yes, so hi, I'm Div. I'm in year 13 in Westlake Boys High School, and I sit on the board of trustees as well, so we discuss kind of like the future of education quite often. And we, even as a big school, we rely heavily on like the Ministry of Education's guidance on various things. So I was just wondering if, Cathy, you were talking about kind of the training of the teachers to be able to deliver well on online platforms. So do you think the ministry has kind of a role to develop, like with partnering with other companies, some sort of course where teachers can learn how to deliver better programs for children?
Great question. And obviously, I think what I'm likely to say from that, because absolutely everyone needs to put support to do their job better. And I feel very sorry for the teachers who've come home and said, oh, I've just been given a Moodle login and I've got to put a course up and I don't know what to do. I have heard that from a lot of sectors. So it would be amazing if we did have some plan to put that sort of training more at the forefront than it is, because there is so much that they could do more smoothly and not impact on all those hours that they do sitting at home trying to work it out. And that's what we've got to stop, is we can be proactive on this. And I would really love an engagement where you could work, because if my experience of doing this and building it in industry could be put out to teachers, that's what you want. You want some knowledge, some from the universities, the theory, mix the theory with the practical. So where they're saying, here's all my adult learning theory, here's how I'm supposed to develop it, but I've got a day to get a course up on Moodle. What can I do effectively? So I think it's a great opportunity. It's a big gap, and I would love to see some backing to be able to develop more training in that area. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Is that it, guys? We are still open to questions if you want. We have a few more minutes left, or if you think you have given up. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for providing me opportunity to ask another question. Honorable Paula, I just like to mention, because we didn't have shortage of some staff, teacher like mathematics and science. So like in my own opinion, so we can bring some teacher from other nations like Australia, England, bring them as a contract base, because I know some schools, they have not math teachers especially. a government give them opportunity to other nations teachers, so they can come as a contract base, like 5-year contract with them, so they can cover the science teacher and physics, science and mathematics physics teachers.
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
What, bring in some teachers from offshore
Yeah.
for maths and science? Well, that's one possibility. You know, if we can find the right people who can do a good job. Obviously, getting people over the border at the moment is tricky, given the desire of so many New Zealanders to come back as well.
Yeah, sure. Because otherwise we have not enough teacher at the moment. Especially, I know one friend of mine. He's currently teaching in Palmerston or high schools. Because he was student, he just did one degree from Auckland Uni. Because so lot of colleges at moment they have shortage of staff, especially in mathematics and science. So if our government provide them special contract system, they can come as a contract.
Yeah. You got
like 5-year contract, so they can put them, then they cover. Yeah, so they can, then we have to we have a better education system. We can improve easy way to improve the better education system in New Zealand.
Yeah,
I think adding to that question is just one. My view is just like if we have got bringing at the moment currently, even though we are in COVID situation, we are bringing experts and skilled health professionals from overseas. So is that something are we doing, or can we do that for the education sector until we have got that level of courses or specialist teachers for maths and science developed in New Zealand itself? We would like to have those courses developed here rather than bring people. But at this moment, we don't have that. Then can we bring those experts from overseas as a matter of fact, like the health professionals we are bringing?
Yeah, well, there is a bit of that happens, and you probably want to do a bit of both. Recognize that there are some certain subjects you need to pay more for to get the best practitioners, and then also, you know, there are some people who want to come to New Zealand, and so we recognize that and make use of that in the education space as well. So yes, absolutely.
Cool.
One question. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Welcome.
It will sound funny, like, yeah. If we have to import or get teachers, doctors, nurses, engineers from overseas, then what are we doing as a nation? If we have to import everything, what are my question is pertaining to human resources. What are we doing to develop the homegrown talent?
I mean, it's a fair challenge.
Okay.
And the reality is that the homegrown talent has a lot of choices. And you know, if you're a good mathematician, and you know, the world is your oyster, you can do lots of things. And teaching is not necessarily at the top of the list. And so that's why it is a bit of a supply and demand issue. That's the reality, and we sort of refuse to accept that, and then wonder why we have a shortage.
Sorry, this is very similar to what's happening with laborers in New Zealand, correct? So we have many laborers available, but they don't have, they have a choice to working or not working because they can still get support from work and income. But we have laborers from overseas that they don't get any support from work and income, for example, and they're happy to work with any money. So this is their choice, pretty much. There are so many talented people in New Zealand that they could be good teachers, but probably because they want more money and they cannot get it, they're deciding to do something else, as you mentioned. Am I right?
Well, yes. I mean, you know, the demand for people with mathematical skills is high, that's just the reality. And so that's where that challenge comes in. It's not just that; it's actually there are a few other subjects as well. But, yeah. Anyway, it's been a useful discussion, and thank you very much. I've appreciated it.
Oh, thanks very much.
Chat to you, and but to go on to another one in 3 minutes, so I better get cracking. But thank you very much for the opportunity to talk, and I wish you all the very best.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Minister.
Honorable MP, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future. Thanks a lot for giving us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. See you, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.